The streets of ancient Rome glittered with celebration. Musicians filled the air with the sound of flutes and lyres, while guests dressed in fine wool and colorful togas gathered outside the home of a wealthy family. Garlands of flowers decorated the doorway. Servants hurried with trays of wine, and laughter echoed through the neighborhood. To an outsider, it looked like the perfect wedding, a joyful union blessed by the gods and admired by the entire community. But beneath the smiles and festive songs, another emotion lingered in the hearts of many young brides: fear. For a Roman girl, marriage was rarely a matter of personal choice. It was often arranged by her father to strengthen family alliances, protect wealth, or improve political influence. Some brides were only in their early teens, leaving behind the only home they had ever known. As the celebration continued, they understood that this day marked the end of childhood and the beginning of a life over which they would have little control. Mothers offered quiet advice, older women whispered reassuring words, and servants carefully avoided speaking about what awaited after the feast. For centuries, stories have circulated claiming that Roman wedding nights included horrifying rituals, so disturbing they were deliberately hidden from history. Dramatic books, documentaries, and internet articles have repeated these tales, presenting them as forgotten secrets of the ancient world. Yet historians remain deeply divided. Some argue these stories grew from later legends and misunderstandings, rather than reliable Roman evidence. Others believe that although many sensational claims are exaggerated, the reality faced by countless brides was still deeply unsettling. This is where our journey begins, not with unquestioned myths, but with a search for the truth. What really happened after the wedding feast ended? Were Roman brides subjected to secret rituals too shocking to record, or has history transformed ordinary customs into terrifying legends? To answer that question, we must step beyond the celebration, leave the cheering guests behind, and enter the private world of marriage in ancient Rome, where tradition, power, and fear often walked hand in hand. As dawn broke over Rome, the bride's wedding day began with rituals that had been practiced for generations. Female relatives and trusted attendants gathered around her, carefully dressing her in a simple white tunic tied with the distinctive nodus Herculeus, or Hercules knot. Ancient Romans believed this special knot symbolized strength, fidelity, and fertility. Over her hair, they placed a flame-colored veil known as the flammeum, making her instantly recognizable as a bride. To the cheering crowds lining the streets, she appeared radiant and honored. Yet behind the ceremonial clothing stood a young woman preparing to leave everything familiar behind. The wedding itself was far more than a celebration of love. For wealthy Roman families, marriage was often a carefully negotiated agreement that secured political alliances, protected family fortunes, or strengthened social status. Fathers discussed contracts, dowries, and inheritance long before the bride and groom stood together. Personal affection was welcomed if it developed, but it was rarely the primary purpose of the union. Marriage represented the joining of two households and the continuation of a respected family line. Religious ceremonies reinforced the seriousness of the occasion. Sacrifices were offered to the gods, prayers sought divine favor, and witnesses observed every important step. Once the formalities were complete, the bride symbolically left the authority of her father and entered the household of her husband. Depending on the legal form of the marriage, her rights and obligations could vary, but socially, expectations remained clear. She was expected to become a loyal wife, manage the household, and eventually bear legitimate children. As evening approached, the joyful procession carried her through Rome's streets toward her new home. Guests sang traditional wedding songs, carried torches, and celebrated what appeared to be a happy ending. Yet every step brought the bride closer to an uncertain future. Behind the laughter and music lay enormous pressure, because once the doors of her husband's house closed, society expected her to embrace an entirely new role. The festivities were ending, but the most mysterious and emotionally charged part of the wedding was only about to begin. As the last wedding guests drifted home and the music faded into the Roman night, the atmosphere changed completely. The crowded banquet hall gave way to the quiet interior of the groom's house, where only a few close family members and experienced married women remained. The bride, exhausted by the day's ceremonies, crossed the threshold carefully. According to Roman custom, she was often lifted or guided over it so she would not stumble. an act believed to prevent bad luck from entering the marriage. Every movement carried symbolic meaning, reflecting the Romans' belief that the favor of the gods could determine the couple's future. Inside the marital chamber, more traditions followed. The bride removed her flame-colored veil, while attendants offered final words of advice before leaving the newly married couple alone. One important ritual involved the groom untying the nodus Herculeus, the Hercules knot that secured the bride's tunic. This was not meant to be rushed, as the knot symbolized the transition from maidenhood to married life, and was associated with hopes for fertility and a prosperous household. Ancient writers described this moment as deeply ceremonial, emphasizing its religious and social significance rather than presenting it as a public spectacle. Centuries later, dramatic stories emerged claiming that secret and exceptionally brutal wedding night rituals took place behind those closed doors. These tales have circulated widely in popular culture, often presented as historical fact. However, modern historians urge caution. No reliable Roman source describes many of the shocking practices frequently repeated online. Much of the sensational narrative appears to have developed through later exaggerations, misunderstandings, or fictional retellings rather than contemporary evidence. Even without those legends, the reality for many Roman brides was daunting. Many were very young, entering marriages arranged by their families and living in a society where expectations of obedience were immense. Consent, as understood today, was not central to Roman marriage customs. For countless brides, the uncertainty of that first night came not from a hidden ritual, but from stepping into a life where duty, family honor, and social expectations outweighed personal choice, making the transition both emotionally and psychologically overwhelming. When the sun rose the morning after the wedding, the celebration was over, but the expectations placed upon the new bride had only just begun. In Roman society, marriage was not viewed as a private relationship between two individuals. It was a public institution that affected the reputation, wealth, and future of both families. Every action of the young wife would now be watched closely by relatives, neighbors, and servants. Her ability to adapt to her new household was considered a reflection of her upbringing and the honor of the family that had raised her. The bride was expected to embrace her role without complaint. She managed domestic affairs, supervised household servants if the family was wealthy, prepared religious offerings to the household gods, and maintained order within the home. Above all, she was expected to produce legitimate heirs. Children were essential for preserving family names, inheriting property, and continuing religious traditions. If years passed without offspring, the wife often faced intense pressure regardless of whether the cause was actually hers. Rumors spread quickly in Roman society, and a woman's reputation could be damaged by gossip as much as by fact. Although Roman women could enjoy greater legal rights than women in some other ancient civilizations, especially during the later Republican Empire, the balance of power remained overwhelmingly in favor of men. Depending on the form of marriage, some women retained property and certain legal protections, while others came under stronger authority within their husband's household. Even where the law offered limited independence, social expectations demanded obedience, modesty, and unwavering loyalty. A husband's infidelity was often tolerated far more readily than a wife's, revealing the unequal standards that shaped daily life. Looking back, the true harshness of Roman marriage may not have rested in one mysterious wedding night ritual. Instead, it was embedded in a system where personal freedom was often sacrificed to family duty, political ambition, and social tradition. The new bride had survived the wedding ceremony, but she was now expected to spend the rest of her life fulfilling obligations that society had chosen for her long before she had any voice in the matter. For generations, dramatic stories about Roman wedding nights have captured the public imagination. Popular books, viral videos, and sensational articles have claimed that the Romans practiced horrifying rituals deliberately erased from history. Some describe secret ceremonies involving humiliation or extreme violence, presenting them as forgotten facts hidden for nearly 2,000 years. These accounts are often told with great confidence, leaving audiences to wonder why such shocking customs were never taught in school. But when historians began tracing these stories back to their original sources, the evidence proved far more complicated. Researchers turned to Roman law, surviving letters, historical chronicles, poetry, inscriptions, and archaeological discoveries. They examined the writings of authors such as Pliny, Livy, Ovid, and other ancient commentators who described marriage, family life, and social customs in remarkable detail. Surprisingly, many of the sensational claims repeated today cannot be found in these contemporary Roman sources. Instead, they appear in much later writings where legends, misunderstandings, moral criticism, and dramatic storytelling had become intertwined with genuine history. Over centuries, repeated retellings transformed speculation into apparent fact. That does not mean Roman marriage was gentle or equal by modern standards. Historical evidence clearly shows that many girls married at a young age, often through arrangements made by their families. Love was secondary to political alliances, economic security, and preserving family status. Once married, women faced enormous social pressure to obey their husbands, manage the household, and produce heirs. Their lives were shaped by expectations they had little power to challenge, even if the legal details varied across different periods of Roman history. In many ways, the search for a single hidden ritual distracts from a deeper truth. The everyday realities of Roman marriage could be difficult enough without inventing ceremonies that lack historical support. The greatest brutality may not have been concealed behind one closed bedroom door, but woven into a society where authority rested overwhelmingly in male hands, and where a young woman's future was often decided long before she reached adulthood. Sometimes history becomes more revealing not when myths are confirmed, but when they are carefully separated from documented evidence. As the centuries passed, the mighty Roman Empire collapsed, its cities changed, and its institutions disappeared. But many of its traditions continued to influence the societies that followed. Roman ideas about marriage, family structure, inheritance, and household authority spread across Europe through law, religion, and custom. Some wedding practices evolved into harmless symbols of commitment, while others gradually disappeared as legal systems and cultural values changed. The passage of time blurred the line between historical fact and popular legend, allowing myths about Roman marriage to grow alongside genuine evidence. Today, archaeologists, historians, and classicists continue to uncover new information about everyday life in ancient Rome. Excavated homes, preserved letters, legal documents, and inscriptions provide valuable glimpses into the lives of ordinary people rather than just emperors and generals. Each discovery helps scholars build a clearer picture of how Roman families actually lived. At the same time, researchers remain cautious about extraordinary claims that lack contemporary evidence. History is filled with stories repeated so often that they begin to sound true, even when the original sources cannot support them. The tale of the so-called hidden wedding night ritual reminds us of an important lesson. Ancient Rome was capable of great achievements in engineering, government, literature, and military organization, yet it was also a society marked by deep inequalities. Women often had limited control over major decisions affecting their lives, especially marriage. Those realities are well documented and require no exaggeration to appear troubling by modern standards. Understanding the past means accepting both its accomplishments and its injustices without allowing sensational myths to replace careful scholarship. Perhaps the greatest mystery was never a secret ceremony hidden behind closed doors. Instead, it was the silence of countless women whose thoughts, fears, and experiences were rarely preserved in written records. Their voices were overshadowed by the men who wrote history, leaving modern researchers to piece together fragments of their lives from scattered evidence. As we separate legend from documented fact, we gain something even more valuable than a shocking story. We gain a clearer understanding of the people who lived, loved, and endured in one of history's most powerful civilizations, and we learn why questioning popular myths is just as important as remembering the past itself.